I should probably start with my name. I'm Elena, 34 years old, and I used to think I was the kind of woman who had her life figured out. Married young to the man I believed was my soulmate, built a home full of laughter, weekend barbecues, road trips that ended in messy motel rooms where we'd fall asleep wrapped around each other like teenagers. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changed. It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was when work swallowed us whole, late nights for him, exhaustion for me. Maybe it was when we started scheduling intimacy, like penciling in dentist appointments instead of losing ourselves in each other the way we used to. Or maybe it was the silence that crept in between conversations, the kind you feel more than hear. Now, don't get me wrong. My husband, Ryan, is still the same man who fixes the leaky sink without being asked, who makes my coffee just the way I like it, 2 sugars, splash of cream. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me the way he used to. Or maybe I stopped feeling seen. So when his best friend from college, Marcus, came to stay with us for a few days, I didn't expect it to shake anything loose inside me. I hadn't seen Marcus in years. He was the fun friend in all of Ryan's college stories, the one who got them into trouble, who could charm his way out of anything. He lived in another state now, traveling for work, and when Ryan told me he'd be crashing in our guest room for the week, I smiled, said, of course, like the dutiful wife I've been trained to be. But that first night, something shifted. I remember opening the door when he arrived, rain dripping off his coat, his smile warm but tired. He hugged me like we were old friends, though really, we weren't. And for the briefest second, as his arms wrapped around me, I felt something. A flicker. Not desire exactly, at least, not yet, but a reminder of how it felt to be noticed. Ryan was thrilled to see him, of course. They cracked open beers, settled into the living room, catching up like no time had passed. I lingered at the edge of their conversation, laughing when it felt appropriate, topping off drinks, feeling like the outsider in my own home. And maybe that's where this really begins, not with Marcus's words, not even with Ryan, but with that growing awareness of how invisible I'd started to feel. Later that night, after Ryan went to bed early, he had a work call the next morning. It was just me and Marcus in the dimly lit kitchen. I was rinsing out glasses when he leaned against the counter, watching me. You seem different, he said finally, his voice low. I froze, water running over my hands. Different? Yeah. He tilted his head, studying me in a way Ryan hadn't in months. Quieter. Sad, maybe. Like there's more going on under the surface than you let people see. It was such a simple thing. Not even romantic. Just observant. But it hit me somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't even realize was starving. Because Ryan used to look at me that way. Used to ask me things, used to peel back my layers until I felt known down to my bones. And somewhere along the way, we lost that. I didn't know what to say to Marcus. So I laughed it off, made some self-deprecating joke, but inside, I felt this complicated rush, gratitude, guilt, longing, all tangled together. And as I lay in bed that night beside my husband, who rolled away in his sleep like he always does now, Marcus's words echoed in my head. You seem different. Maybe I was. Maybe I'd been different for a long time, and no one had noticed until now. The next morning was strange. I woke before Ryan, as usual, the early light spilling across the floor like it always does. I made coffee quietly, the way I always do. It should have felt like any other day. But it didn't. Marcus was already in the kitchen, his hair damp from a shower, wearing a simple t-shirt that somehow made him look like he belonged here. Like he wasn't a guest at all. Morning, he said, his voice warm but not overdone. I nodded, reaching for mugs. Morning. He moved aside to let me pass, but even that small movement felt charged. Not in an overt way. Just in the way someone notices you. Ryan hadn't really looked at me in months, his eyes slid right past, distracted by work, by life, by the dull comfort of routine. But Marcus? He looked straight at me, like he was actually seeing me. It shouldn't have mattered so much. But it did. Over breakfast, Ryan scrolled through his phone between bites of toast while Marcus and I ended up carrying most of the conversation, about books, travel, even the weather, for God's sake. Things Ryan and I used to talk about when conversation came easy, when we were curious about each other instead of just exchanging logistical updates about bills and groceries. Every so often, Marcus would ask me something like, "What do you think?" And wait for the answer. Listen to it. Really listen. Ryan never noticed any of this. But I did. That evening, after dinner, the three of us sat in the living room. Ryan put on a game, beer in hand, half asleep before halftime. Marcus and I shared the couch, a respectful distance apart, but there was this strange awareness between us, like the air was thicker somehow. He leaned toward me at one point, his voice low so Ryan wouldn't wake. "You okay?" Such a small question. But it landed with the weight of everything I hadn't said out loud. I nodded quickly. Too quickly. Yeah, just tired. But I wasn't. I was restless. Restless in a way that had nothing to do with Marcus himself, not really, but with what he represented, a mirror held up to the quiet discontent I'd been ignoring in my marriage. Later, after Ryan finally dragged himself upstairs, Marcus stayed behind, finishing his drink. I should have gone to bed. I should have left him there. Instead, I sat back down. It was reckless, maybe, but I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts yet. We talked for a long time, about nothing and everything, the music we liked, the places he'd been for work, the fact that I used to paint before life got too busy. He asked me why I stopped. I didn't have an answer. Somewhere between laundry loads and office deadlines and Ryan's long hours, I just stopped being the woman who stayed up past midnight with paint on her hands, laughing over cheap wine and unfinished canvases. Marcus didn't push, but he didn't look away either. That was the thing about him, he carried his attention like a gift. Offered it without asking for anything back. And maybe that's why, when his hand brushed mine as we both reached for the empty glasses, I felt that tiny spark again. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even deliberate. Just the accidental touch of skin on skin. But I felt it. And from the way his eyes flicked to mine, just for a second, I knew he did too. That night, lying beside Ryan in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the space between us. Not just physical space, though there was that too, the way he automatically rolled to his side of the bed, his back to me like always. But the bigger space. The one made of unspoken words, missed glances, nights spent side by side but miles apart. Marcus wasn't the problem. He was just the reminder. The reminder of what it felt like to be seen, to be asked questions that made me remember who I used to be before life and love grew so quiet. And once you remember, it's hard to forget. By the third day, I could feel something shifting inside me. It wasn't loud or dramatic, the way people imagine change happens. It was slow, quiet, like water wearing away stone. Ryan barely noticed. He was busy, always busy, calls with work, emails late into the night, texts he answered with quick, distracted thumbs. He wasn't cold, exactly. He kissed my forehead before leaving in the mornings, asked if I needed anything from the store when he came home. But his affection felt like routine now, not choice. And maybe that was what hurt the most. Marcus, on the other hand, he was present. Not in an overwhelming way. He wasn't flirting, wasn't crossing any obvious lines. But he was there. He asked questions. He remembered my answers. He laughed at things Ryan used to laugh at before life got so heavy. And every time he looked at me, really looked, I felt that tiny crack inside me widening. That evening, it rained again. A steady, gentle kind of rain that made the whole house feel softer, quieter. Ryan was in his office on yet another call. I was in the kitchen making tea when Marcus wandered in, sleeves pushed up, hair damp from his shower. You always make tea at night, he asked, leaning against the counter like he belonged there. I nodded. Helps me sleep. He smiled faintly. You don't seem like someone who sleeps much. I paused, teabag mid-dip. What makes you say that? He shrugged. You just seem like your mind's always busy. Like you carry more than you let on. It was disarming, how easily he saw through me. Ryan hadn't asked about my thoughts in months. Maybe years. I didn't know what to say, so I handed him a mug instead. We sat at the table, the rain tapping against the windows, the whole house dim and quiet except for the low hum of Ryan's voice in the other room. You know, Marcus said after a while, Ryan used to talk about you all the time back in college. Said you were the only one who kept him grounded. The only one who made him slow down and actually feel things. I stared at my tea. Yeah. That was a long time ago. Does he still? Marcus asked softly. Still what? Still feel things? Still talk about me? Still see me? I didn't ask. Because I already knew the answer. Instead, I said lightly, we've been married 10 years. Things change. He studied me for a long moment. They don't have to. It wasn't a romantic statement. Not exactly. But it landed in the quiet space between us like a pebble in deep water, the ripples spreading further than I wanted them to. I changed the subject, asked about his work, his travels, anything to steer the conversation away from the growing weight in my chest. But the words lingered long after he left the kitchen. They don't have to. That night, Ryan and I barely spoke before bed. He was tired, he said. Big meeting tomorrow. He kissed the top of my head, rolled to his side, and fell asleep almost instantly. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain, feeling the distance between us like a physical thing. Down the hall, Marcus was in the guest room. I wasn't thinking about him in the way people might assume. It wasn't about him, not really. It was about me. About the hollow space inside me I hadn't realized had grown so big. About the way Ryan and I used to talk until 2 a.m., about nothing and everything, and now barely talked at all. Marcus hadn't created the crack. He'd just made me notice it. And once you notice a crack, you start to wonder how long before something breaks. It happened on the 4th night. Maybe it was inevitable. You can only press things down for so long before they force their way out. Ryan had been gone most of the evening, stuck at some work dinner. He'd texted me a quick "don't wait up" message, like he always did. No apology. No real explanation. Just those 3 words I'd grown to hate. Marcus and I had eaten leftovers in the kitchen. He told a funny story about getting lost in Paris on a work trip, about how his bad French had led to the most expensive taxi ride of his life. I laughed. Actually laughed. Not the polite kind I usually give at work or in grocery store small talk, but the real kind. The kind that bubbles up before you can stop it. And for a moment, I felt like me again, the me I used to be before routine and loneliness dulled my edges. But then Marcus went quiet, looking at me with that same steady gaze that always seemed to see too much. You miss him, don't you? He asked softly. The question landed like a punch. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words caught somewhere in my throat. Because the truth was complicated. Did I miss Ryan? Or did I miss the version of him who used to look at me the way Marcus did now, like I was a whole person, not just a wife who managed the house and his calendar and the pieces of our life he no longer seemed to notice? I miss us, I admitted finally, my voice low. Marcus nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. And that, God help me, that's what cracked something wide open inside me. Because Ryan should have been the one hearing this. Ryan should have been sitting here across from me, asking me what was wrong, asking me anything at all. But he wasn't. He was out there somewhere, living his life parallel to mine, our paths crossing only for bills and birthdays and holiday photos where we smiled like strangers pretending to be happy.